Welcome, Quiet One, to Sleepy Story World channel. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. This channel exists for moments exactly like this one, when the day is finally done, when the lights are low, and when the only thing left to do is let go. Tonight, we are going to spend our time with one of the most quietly magnificent creatures on the planet, the owl. There is something about owls that has always felt like it belongs to the night. Not the noisy, rushing part of the night, but the deep, soft, unhurried part. The part that exists after the world has gone still. That is the world the owl lives in, and for the next little while, it is the world we will gently visit together. If these quiet journeys bring you some peace, it means a great deal if you take a moment to like and subscribe, or leave a small thought in the comments below. It helps other tired souls find their way here too, one sleepy listener at a time. But for now, there is nothing at all you need to do. Just breathe, settle in, and let the quiet world of the owl carry you somewhere soft. Let us begin. There are more than 250 species of owl in the world. That number might surprise you. When most people picture an owl, they imagine a single kind of creature, round and silent and wise-looking, perched somewhere high in the dark. But owls are not one thing. They are a vast and varied family spread across nearly every corner of the earth. They live in the frozen tundra of the far north. They nest in the scorching emptiness of desert canyons. They settle into tropical rainforests so dense with green that sunlight barely finds the ground. They perch in the quiet countryside, in old barns, in hollow trees along the edges of sleeping fields. Some owls are smaller than your fist. Others have wingspans wider than a grown person's arms stretched open. The family of owls is ancient and enormous, a lineage that has found ways to thrive in almost every kind of place the world has to offer. The smallest owl in the world fits in the palm of your hand. It is called the elf owl, and it lives mostly in the deserts of the southwestern parts of North America and in Mexico. It stands no taller than 5 inches. It weighs less than a golf ball. And yet, for all its smallness, it is fully and completely an owl. It hunts insects and small scorpions in the desert night. It raises its young inside the hollowed-out chambers of giant cactus plants, nestled safely in the dry, warm dark. When threatened, the elf owl does something remarkable. It goes still. It pretends very convincingly to be dead. It closes its eyes, drops its body limp, and waits. And when the danger passes, it simply wakes back up and carries on with the night. There's something deeply peaceful about that image. A tiny creature smaller than most people's hands, living its whole life in the quiet desert darkness, unbothered and unhurried, knowing exactly when to be still. Owls have been on this earth for a very long time. Fossil evidence suggests that owl-like birds existed more than 60 million years ago. That is before many of the familiar mammals walking the earth today had even arrived. The earliest owls were not exactly like the ones we know now. They were part of a broader group of birds that was still finding its shape. But the core of what makes an owl, the forward-facing eyes, the silent flight, the skill for hunting in darkness has remained remarkably unchanged across those millions of years. Owls have watched the world change almost beyond recognition and simply continued on night after night, perched and patient and perfectly suited to the dark. An owl's eyes are extraordinary in ways that are almost hard to comprehend. To begin with, they are enormous. If a human had eyes proportionately as large as an owl's, those eyes would be roughly the size of a grapefruit. The reason for this is simple. Owls evolved to see in conditions where almost no light exists at all. Their eyes are packed with cells called rods, which are extremely sensitive to even the faintest glimmer. This allows an owl to detect movement in light levels that would leave a human seeing nothing but complete blackness. Some species can spot a mouse moving across an open field by the light of a single candle from over 100 feet away. But there is a trade-off. Owl eyes are shaped more like tubes than spheres. They are held in place inside the skull by bony rings called sclerotic rings, and they cannot rotate. An owl cannot glance sideways the way you or I can. It must turn its whole head to look in a different direction. And this is where that famous flexibility comes from. An owl can rotate its head up to 270 degrees in either direction. Not a full circle, as the old stories sometimes suggest, but far more than seems possible when you watch it happen. Special adaptations in the owl's neck allow this. They have twice as many neck vertebrae as we do. Their blood vessels are designed with special reservoirs, so that even when the neck is twisted far to one side, blood still flows freely to the brain. And so the owl sits very still and simply turns its head, slow and smooth and silent, seeing everything. The hearing of an owl is equally astonishing. Many owls have asymmetrical ears, meaning one ear sits slightly higher on the skull than the other. This is not an accident. It is a precise and elegant piece of engineering, because one ear receives sound from slightly above and the other from slightly below. The owl's brain can triangulate sound in 3 dimensions with extraordinary accuracy. A barn owl, which is one of the most studied owls in the world, can hunt in total darkness, guided only by the faint rustle of a mouse moving through dry leaves. Not the sight of the mouse, not even the smell, just the soft, barely there sound it makes as it moves. The barn owl's dish-shaped face acts like a satellite receiver, collecting and funneling sound toward its ears with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. In laboratory experiments, barn owls were placed in completely darkened rooms and given only rustling sounds to follow. They caught their targets again and again without a single photon of light to guide them, just listening. The flight of an owl is one of the quietest things in the natural world. Most birds in flight produce a rushing, whirring sound as their wings push through air. You can often hear a pigeon or a crow approaching before you see it. But an owl is nearly silent. The reason lies in the structure of their feathers. The leading edge of an owl's primary feathers, the long outer feathers that do the work of flight, is covered in a comb-like fringe of tiny filaments. These filaments break up the turbulence that would otherwise create sound as the wing cuts through air. The trailing edge of the feather is soft and irregular, further diffusing any noise. And the surface of the wing itself is covered in a velvety layer of down that absorbs rather than reflects sound. The result is a bird that can glide past you in full flight and make no more sound than a shadow. The prey never hears it coming, and if you were sitting very still on a dark forest night and an owl passed close overhead, you might feel the faint breath of its wings on your face before you ever heard a thing. Engineers have studied owl feathers for decades, looking for ways to apply the same principles to the design of quieter aircraft. Some wind turbine blades now carry serrated edges, inspired directly by the fringe along an owl's wing. A creature refined by millions of years of silent flight is now helping us build a quieter world. The barn owl is perhaps the most widely distributed land bird on Earth. It is found on every continent except Antarctica. It lives in Europe and North America and South America, in Australia and Africa, and across the islands of the Pacific. It has crossed oceans and found its way into almost every kind of human landscape. Old barns, church towers, crumbling stone walls, the hollow eaves of ancient buildings. For thousands of years, humans and barn owls have lived side by side, each mostly ignoring the other, each going about the quiet business of survival in the dark. In many cultures throughout history, the barn owl's pale, ghostly form, drifting through the night, gave rise to stories of spirits and omens. Its call, a long, rasping shriek, quite unlike the soft hoot most people expect, was heard drifting through graveyards and old ruins, and was taken as a sign of something beyond the ordinary world. But it was just an owl, a perfectly ordinary barn owl, doing what barn owls do. Living in old stone places, hunting mice, calling through the dark. Owls swallow their prey whole and then recycle what they cannot digest. An owl does not have a crop, that special pouch that many birds use to store food before digestion. Instead, it swallows its prey largely whole, bones and fur and feathers included. The digestible parts are processed in the stomach, but the bones, the fur, the scales of insects, the feathers of small birds, these are compacted together in the owl's gizzard and formed into a small, compact pellet. Several hours after eating, the owl coughs this pellet back up. It is a neat, tidy bundle of everything that could not be used. Scientists collect these pellets and pull them apart with care, reading the tiny skeletons inside like a kind of diary of what the owl has been eating. From a single pellet, a careful researcher can identify the exact species of vole or shrew or sparrow that the owl caught the night before. It is one of the more gentle forms of scientific investigation. The owl is unharmed. The pellet is left behind like a gift. And science has a record. Some owls do not hoot at all. The word owl and the sound hoot are so thoroughly connected in most people's minds that it can be genuinely surprising to learn that many owls do not make that sound. The barn owl, as mentioned, shrieks. The saw-whet owl makes a sound like a blade being drawn across metal, a repetitive whistling note that goes on and on through the night forest. The barking owl of Australia makes a sound uncannily similar to a dog. The screech owl, despite its name, most often produces a long descending whinny, trembling and soft, like something being slowly released from a great height. The great grey owl produces low, booming sounds that carry extraordinary distances through its forest home. Owls speak in many languages. Each species has its own voice, shaped by where it lives and what it needs to say. Most owl calls are about territory and partnership. Two owls calling to each other in the dark are often a mated pair, checking in, confirming boundaries, keeping the thread of connection alive across the night. There's something tender about that. Two birds invisible to each other in the dark, calling back and forth through the trees, listening, answering, finding each other by sound alone. Many owl species mate for life, or something very close to it. Barn owls, great horned owls, tawny owls, many of the well-known species tend to form long-term bonds with a single partner. They return to the same nesting site year after year. They call to one another across the same stretch of territory season after season. The bond is maintained through behavior, through the small daily rituals of being near each other, grooming each other's feathers, roosting close together on a shared branch, hunting in overlapping ranges. When one of a mated pair is lost, the surviving owl will sometimes call for many nights into the empty dark, waiting for an answer that no longer comes. There is a word in many languages for that kind of steadiness: devotion. The owl does not name it, but it lives it quietly and without ceremony in the dark hours between midnight and morning. Owls do not build their own nests. This surprises a great many people. The image of a bird building a nest, weaving together twigs and grass and soft material, is so fundamental that it feels like something all birds do. But most owls take a different approach. They find a space that already exists and move in. A hollow in the trunk of an old tree, an abandoned nest left behind by a hawk or a crow, a crevice in a cliff face, a gap in the eaves of an old building, the burrow of a prairie dog dug into soft earth by another creature entirely. The burrowing owl, which lives across the open grasslands of North and South America, nests entirely underground. It either digs its own burrow with surprising efficiency, or simply takes over a ready-made one. It stands guard at the entrance, looking like a small, serious sentry, watching the wide plains around it with eyes that see everything. Owls are remarkably patient hunters. They do not chase prey across great distances, the way a falcon or a hawk might. Instead, they wait. A hunting owl will sit on a perch, a fence post, a low branch, the edge of a barn roof, and simply watch and listen. It may wait for 10 minutes. It may wait for an hour. The owl has no urgency. It is not anxious. It is not in a hurry. It simply waits in the dark, present and still and fully attentive until the moment arrives. And then it moves so fast and so silently that the moment of the strike is over before it has properly begun. There is a kind of wisdom in that patience that humans have admired for a very long time. In many traditions around the world, the owl is associated with intelligence and calm and deep seeing. Perhaps because anyone who has watched an owl sit through the night, unmoving and alert, has felt that there is something in it that knows something they do not. The ancient Greeks associated the owl with Athena, goddess of wisdom. The small owl that appeared on Athenian coins for centuries, the little owl that still bears the scientific name Athene noctua, was a symbol of that city and that goddess. It was said that owls flew above the Greek army before battles, a sign of Athena's presence and favor. That such a small, quiet, unassuming bird was chosen to represent something as immense as wisdom
tells you something. True intelligence, the ancient Greeks seem to suggest, looks like stillness. It looks like careful watching. It looks like knowing when to act and when to simply wait. In Japan, the owl is called fukuro, a word that sounds very much like the word for good luck and protection from suffering. Owl imagery appears on good luck charms, on keychains, on the facades of small businesses. The owl is a protector, a guardian of the night, something steady and watchful that keeps the darkness from feeling threatening. Owl cafes, small tea rooms where people can sit quietly in the company of living owls, became a gentle cultural phenomenon in Japanese cities in the early 2000s. There is something people find soothing about sitting near an owl, about watching it watch the room with those great, calm, unreadable eyes. In some Native American traditions, the owl carries a different kind of significance. It is a messenger between the living world and the world of spirits. Its night-traveling nature, its silence, its ability to see in darkness made it a natural symbol of the boundary between what is known and what lies beyond. In certain traditions, it was treated with deep respect, and an owl call heard at night was listened to carefully, as one might listen to a message from someone who has gone ahead. In others, the owl was entirely benign, a creature of power and medicine knowledge, its feathers used in healing and ceremony. Every tradition read the owl through the lens of its own relationship with the night. And the owl, as always, did not comment. It simply sat on its branch and waited for morning. Owls can locate prey buried under a foot of snow. The great gray owl, the largest owl by length in North America, spends its winters hunting across snow-covered boreal forests. These forests in winter are quiet in a way that is almost total. The snow absorbs sound. The trees stand heavy and still. The world becomes a white and silent place. Beneath that white, small rodents continue to move through tunnels in the snow, warm and hidden and invisible from above. The great gray owl sits in the branches overhead and listens. It can hear a vole moving through its snow tunnel from a distance of over 60 feet. When the owl hears it, it drops from the branch, plunges feet first through the snow crust, and catches the vole beneath. In full winter, through a foot of hard-packed snow, finding a creature it has never seen by sound alone. Researchers have filmed this happening and watched the footage carefully, trying to understand exactly how it works. The owl's facial disc, that broad, flat, round arrangement of feathers around the face, is not decorative. It is a sound-collecting dish shaped by evolution to direct the faintest vibrations toward the owl's precisely positioned ears. The great gray owl hears through its face, and in hearing finds what is otherwise completely invisible. Owls have 3 eyelids. Most people know about the outer eyelid that closes during sleep, but owls also have a second eyelid that closes from below when they blink, and a third called a nictitating membrane, a thin translucent layer that sweeps horizontally across the eye from the inner corner outward. This third eyelid keeps the eye moist and protected, clearing away dust and debris, and it can close over the eye even when the owl is fully awake, giving it that occasional, far-away, dreamy look. The nictitating membrane also closes at the moment of impact during a strike, protecting the owl's precious eyes from any struggling prey. Even at the most intense moment of the hunt, the owl takes care of its eyes. Snowy owls are one of the very few owls active during daylight hours. Most owls are creatures of the night, but the snowy owl, which nests on the open Arctic tundra,
does not have the luxury of waiting for dark. In summer, the Arctic receives sunlight for 24 hours a day. There is no night at all. And so the snowy owl hunts by day, its white plumage matching the snow around it, moving across the vast open landscape like a slow, drifting cloud. In winter, some snowy owls travel south in large numbers, appearing unexpectedly in fields and airports and coastal areas far from their summer home. These movements, called eruptions, happen when prey populations in the north are low, and the owls must range further to find enough food. The sight of a snowy owl sitting in a snowy field or perched on a rooftop in an otherwise ordinary town has a particular quality of unreality, as though something from another world has briefly and quietly crossed over into this one. Owls have talons stronger than most people imagine. Their feet are not just for grasping, they are precision instruments. The grip strength of a great horned owl, one of the most common large owls in North America, has been measured at around 300 pounds of force per square inch. This is several times the grip strength of a human hand and is sufficient to crush the skull of a rabbit or a skunk before the prey realizes what has happened. The killing is immediate and efficient. The owl does not prolong suffering. It is designed for precision, not violence. Owls also have zygodactyl feet, meaning 2 toes face forward and 2 face backward, which gives them an enormous span and a secure grip on any surface they land on. One toe in particular, called the outer or 4th toe, can rotate to either a forward-facing or backward-facing position. This versatility means the owl can adapt the arrangement of its talons to whatever it is gripping: a branch, a fence post, or prey of various sizes. An owl sitting on a branch at rest holds on with a passive locking mechanism in its tendons, similar to the way a person's hand curls naturally when asleep. The owl does not have to work to hold on. The grip is simply there, steady and secure, even in the deepest sleep. Owls sleep in an unusual way. Young owls, before they have mastered perching, sometimes sleep lying flat on their stomachs, chins pressed against the wood of the branch or nest edge, eyes closed, wings spread slightly out to either side. It looks exactly as you might imagine an exhausted small creature would look. Photographs of sleeping owlet chicks lying face down on logs have been shared millions of times by people who found the image nearly unbearably endearing. Adult owls sleep upright on their perch, feathers fluffed around them, face tucked slightly down or turned back to tuck into their own wing feathers. They look in sleep profoundly comfortable, like something that has found exactly the right place and has no intention of going anywhere at all. Owl chicks make a sound called snoring. Scientifically, it is described as a contact call, a soft hissing or snoring sound that owlets make to let their parents know where they are. In the dark of the nest, in a tree hollow or a barn corner, the babies call quietly into the dark, and the parent returning from a hunt follows that sound back to them. It is one of the quieter forms of navigation in nature. A soft, continuous murmur of small voices saying, "We are here, we are here, we are here." And the parent drops silently from the sky and arrives. Owls grow their flight feathers in a careful sequence. Birds that fly need to replace their feathers regularly because feathers wear out over time. But the process of molting, of dropping old feathers and growing new ones, must be managed carefully so that the bird never loses the ability to fly. Most owls mold only a few feathers at a time, starting from the center of the wing and working slowly outward over months. The process takes so long that in some species it continues across more than 1 year. At any given moment, an owl's wings are a patchwork of feathers at different stages. Some old and slightly worn, some freshly grown and pristine. And yet, the owl flies perfectly. The asymmetry is invisible in the dark. The hunting never stops. Some owls are incredibly well camouflaged during the day. Most owls rest during daylight hours, roosting in a quiet spot and trusting that they will not be disturbed. Many have plumage that mimics the bark of trees so perfectly that a bird sitting against a tree trunk can be completely invisible to a passing eye. The long-eared owl, when threatened on its roost, draws itself upright, compresses its feathers tightly, narrows its eyes to slits, and becomes, startlingly, part of the tree. Its ear tufts, which are not ears at all but just feathers arranged to look like ears, rise and angle inward, completing the impression of a broken branch. Birdwatchers have stood very close to long-eared owls without seeing them. The owl sits still. The owl trusts the stillness, and the stillness holds. Owls have been used in farming for centuries as natural pest control. A single barn owl family, 2 parents and their growing chicks, can consume close to 1,000 small rodents in a single nesting season. Farmers in many parts of the world have long understood this and provided nesting boxes in their barns and fields to encourage owls to stay. Modern organic farms in California's wine country have installed thousands of nesting boxes across the vineyards, creating whole communities of barn owls that patrol the rows of vines at night, keeping the rodent populations low without the use of poisons. The owls get nesting sites, the vines get protection, and the night fills quietly with wings. The relationship between owls and the trees they live in is older than agriculture, older than cities, older than most of the things we think of as permanent. Old forests have old trees with old hollows, and old hollows are what owls need most. A great spotted owl, one of the most studied owls in North America, depends entirely on ancient forest, trees that have been growing for hundreds of years. Trees large enough to have developed the deep cavities and broken tops and fallen limbs that make a forest into an actual home, rather than just a stand of wood. When those forests are cut, the spotted owl has nowhere to go. It cannot substitute. It cannot adapt to a managed plantation of uniform young trees. It needs what has taken centuries to grow. The spotted owl became one of the most publicly known birds in conversations about conservation in the 1990s, when its protection under the Endangered Species Act created intense conflict between environmental and logging interests. It was a small bird at the center of a very large argument. An argument about old things and whether old things have value simply for being old. The owl did not participate in the debate. It simply needed what it had always needed: an old, hollow tree, silence, darkness, and time. The eyesight of owls has another remarkable quality, beyond its sensitivity to dim light. Owls can see ultraviolet light. Many small rodents, the primary prey of many owl species, leave trails of urine as they move through their territories. These urine trails reflect ultraviolet light. To the owl hunting overhead, these trails glow faintly in a way invisible to human eyes, marking the paths where mice and voles have recently traveled. It is as though the ground below the owl is marked with bright lines, a map of recent rodent activity, visible only to eyes that can read in a light our own eyes cannot see. The hunting owl does not simply look for movement. It reads the landscape. It follows the evidence of where life has been, and it finds again and again what it is looking for. Owls are symbols in almost every human culture that has ever existed near them, which is almost all of them. In ancient Rome, the call of an owl was said to foretell the deaths of Julius Caesar, of Augustus, of several emperors. Whether this was observed genuinely or recorded afterward to add a sense of fate to the story, we cannot know. But the association was strong enough to be recorded by some of the most careful writers of the ancient world. In Wales, the tawny owl's call, heard near a pregnant woman, was thought to predict the coming birth. In certain parts of Africa, owls were associated with powerful figures, with sorcerers and mediators between worlds. In India, the owl is the vehicle of Lakshmi, goddess of wealth and fortune, and paintings of the goddess are traditionally accompanied by the round, patient face of an owl at her side. Every culture has looked at the same bird and seen something slightly different in it. The silence, the nighttime presence, the eyes that seem to see more than they should, the voice that comes from nowhere in the dark. Owls have been carrying the weight of human meaning for as long as humans have had meaning to carry. The tawny owl is the most commonly heard owl in Britain. Its call, a long resonant hoot, followed after a moment by a trembling, wavering answering call, is one of the most recognized sounds in the British countryside. It is the owl sound most people in Britain picture when they think of owls calling in the night. Interestingly, the two-part call is not made by one bird. The first hoot, the long single note, is made by the male. The wavering answering quaver is made by the female. What sounds like a single owl calling to the night is actually a conversation between two birds, each speaking their part, each listening for the other, exchanging the quiet language of their bond. Across the dark garden, across the field, across the sleeping village. Shakespeare knew this sound. He referred to the owl in many of his plays, and the call of the tawny owl would have drifted through the nights of the England he lived in. Writers across British literature from Chaucer onward have used the owl's call as a shorthand for the depth of night, for the mystery of the hours when most people are asleep and something watchful and ancient remains awake. That same call is still drifting across British gardens tonight, as it has every night for as long as those birds and those gardens have existed together. The fishing owls of Africa and Asia hunt in a completely different way from most of their relatives. The Pelz fishing owl, a large and striking bird found along African rivers, does not hunt small mammals in open fields. It hunts fish. It sits on a branch overhanging the river and watches the surface of the water. When a fish comes close enough, it drops, catches the fish in its talons, and lifts back out of the water in a single smooth movement. Its feet are adapted for this, rough and spiny on the underside, giving it a grip on wet, slippery prey. And unlike most owls, fishing owls lack the soft, sound-deadening fringes on their flight feathers. They do not need to be silent. Fish cannot hear them coming the way a mouse can. The fishing owl is its own category of owl. The same family, the same ancient lineage, but shaped by its particular river into something entirely its own. Some owls live at very high altitudes.
the spotted owlet, and several other species live in the foothills and lower slopes of the Himalayas. The eagle owl, a massive and imposing bird with feather tufts and orange eyes, is found across a range that extends from Europe through Asia and into parts of Arabia and the Horn of Africa. It nests on cliff ledges and rocky outcrops at significant elevation, hunting across terrain that is mostly bare stone and thin, cold air. The eagle owl is one of the largest owls in the world. Its wingspan can reach nearly 6 feet. It weighs several kilograms, and it hunts prey considerably larger than mice, young foxes, rabbits, hares, other birds of considerable size. It is a bird of tremendous capability, moving through its rocky landscape with the same quiet efficiency that smaller owls bring to their smaller worlds. The word owl itself is one of the oldest words in the English language. Its roots go back to a Proto-Germanic word that imitated the sound of an owl calling. The ancient name was essentially a phonetic attempt to write down the sound the bird made. Ulula, owl. The word has been spoken in the British Isles for well over 1,000 years, passing from one language to the next as peoples moved and changed. The same bird heard through 1,000 winters. The same sound given a name that has hardly changed at all. There is something grounding in that continuity. Words like owls outlast the particular moment they came from. Owls feature in cave paintings. In the Chauvet Cave in southern France, one of the most extraordinary repositories of prehistoric art in the world, there is an image of an owl engraved into the stone. The cave was painted and engraved by early humans more than 30,000 years ago.
The owl in Chauvet is shown from behind, its head turned completely around to look at the viewer. It is unmistakably, completely an owl. The artist who made it knew owls, had watched one turn its head in exactly that way, had been moved enough by that image to press it into stone in the deep dark of a cave, where it has waited for tens of thousands of years to be found again. Humans have been watching owls for as long as humans have been watching anything. And something in that watching has always felt important enough to record. Owls have inspired a great deal of literature. Edward Lear, the poet who gave us so much gentle nonsense verse, wrote The Owl and the Pussycat, a poem so soft and dreamy and odd that it has been memorized and loved by children for more than 150 years. The owl in the poem sails away in a beautiful pea-green boat and sings to the stars, a small guitar in his arms, the moon overhead, a cat beside him. It is a poem that seems designed specifically to be read softly before sleep. A poem that asks for nothing from you, except that you let it carry you away on a small boat into a place where owls sing and stars listen. In the Winnie the Pooh stories by A. A. Milne, the owl character is a figure of gentle pomposity, presenting himself as learned and wise, while frequently being spectacularly wrong about small things. It is an affectionate portrait, gently teasing the association between owls and wisdom. Even in those cozy, honey-colored stories written for children, the owl sits in his treehouse at the edge of the 100-acre wood and holds court through the quiet afternoons. Wise or not, the owl is always there, always awake, always watching. Harry Potter and his snowy owl, Hedwig, introduced an entirely new generation to the particular comfort of imagining an owl as a companion. Hedwig was loyal and beautiful and entirely her own creature. She carried letters through storms. She returned always. She was in the world of those books, a living connection between one place and another, between one person and the people they loved. The image of a white owl crossing a dark sky with a letter in her talons is one of the more quietly beautiful images in that enormous story, and it has settled permanently into the imaginations of many millions of readers. Real snowy owls, of course, do not carry letters, but real snowy owls are arguably even more extraordinary than their fictional counterpart. They travel enormous distances. They navigate Arctic landscapes where the landmarks are few and the wind is constant. They raise their young on open tundra where there is nothing to shelter behind and nothing to hide from. The female incubates her eggs while blizzards blow over her. The male hunts through polar summer light, circling and circling the nesting area, returning again and again with the small, warm bodies of lemmings to feed the growing family beneath him. The number of eggs a snowy owl lays depends entirely on how plentiful the prey is that year. In a year when lemmings are abundant, a snowy owl pair may raise 10 or 11 chicks. In a year when lemmings are scarce, they may not nest at all. The owl does not push against the limits of what the land can provide. It simply reads those limits and responds accordingly. There is a kind of deep biological intelligence in that calibration, a patience with the rhythms of the world that humans have often admired and rarely managed to replicate. Owls have a special relationship with the concept of silence. Not just the silence they create in flight, but the silence they inhabit. An owl at rest is a study in perfect stillness. Its body barely moves as it breathes. Its feathers lie smooth and quiet. Its eyes, when open, do not dart around the way the eyes of anxious creatures do. They move slowly, deliberately, taking in the world with the calm assurance of something that does not feel the need to check every direction at once. An owl at rest looks exactly like what it is, a creature that is entirely at home in its world, not afraid, not hurried, not performing for anyone, just present in the dark, breathing slowly, resting between hunts, waiting for the next thing to arrive. Scientists have found that watching owls lowers the heart rate of observers. There is no formal study I could point you to, but the informal evidence is widespread and compelling. People who keep owls in rehabilitation centers or who work with owls in educational settings almost universally report that time spent near owls is quietly calming. The owl's stillness seems to invite stillness in those around it. Its unhurried pace becomes a kind of permission to slow down, to stop rushing, to breathe at a different rate for a while. We live in a world that often asks us to be faster and louder and more reactive than we are naturally built to be. The owl simply sits, and somehow its sitting is enough. The short-eared owl is one of the owls most often seen in daylight. It hunts over open land and marshes and grassland, flying low and quartering back and forth over the ground like a moth drifting back and forth above a lamp. It has a buoyant, wavering flight style, almost relaxed in appearance, and its pale, buff-colored wings catch the late afternoon light beautifully. To watch a short-eared owl hunting at dusk across a coastal marsh, the tall reeds bending gently, the sky going soft and orange at the edges, is one of the more quietly spectacular things nature offers. And the owl seems entirely unaware of how beautiful it looks, moving back and forth, covering the ground with the calm thoroughness of something that has been doing this for a very long time and expects to be doing it for a very long time more. Owls can hear sounds far below the threshold of human hearing. Some species can detect the heartbeat of prey animals moving beneath soil or leaves. The precision of an owl's hearing system is so fine-tuned that it can detect a sound source and locate it to within 1 degree of arc in both the horizontal and vertical plane. In practical terms, this means the owl can pinpoint the location of a sound with the same accuracy as a human looking directly at a visible object. It can see with its ears. In the dark, through grass, through leaves, through snow. The world that the owl perceives is richer and more dimensional than ours, populated with layers of sound and light that we are simply not equipped to notice. The relationship between owls and death in folklore is complex and worth sitting with quietly. In many cultures, death was not feared as an ending, but understood as a passage, a crossing from one state to another. The owl, with its nighttime habits, its ability to see in darkness, and its appearance at the boundary hours between day and night, was a natural symbol of this passage. Not a bringer of death, but a companion to it. Something that knew the way across, a guide for what was crossing over. Even in traditions where the owl was treated with caution or fear, there was often a sense that the owl was not malevolent. It was simply the bird that happened to know what lay on the other side of night. When we look at it that way, the owl becomes something quite different from a bad omen. It becomes a comfort, a reminder that the dark has a geography, that it is navigable, that something moves through it safely and competently and emerges on the other side. That is a reassuring thought, if you let it be. Owls have been raised by humans since ancient times. Archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt, from Mesopotamia, from classical Rome suggests that people kept owls in captivity, sometimes for the study of them, sometimes as status symbols, sometimes simply because someone found an injured owl and brought it home and could not bring themselves to stop caring for it. Athena herself was said to keep a little owl, and medieval falconers sometimes kept owls alongside their hawks, though owls are considerably more difficult to train than the raptors normally used in falconry. They are, in the words of many people who have worked with them, stubborn and independent and not particularly interested in doing anything they have not decided to do themselves, which is, honestly, exactly what you would expect from an owl. The long-eared owl roosts communally in winter. Through the breeding season, owls tend to be solitary birds, keeping their own territories and living their own quiet lives. But in winter, when food is harder to find and the nights are long, long-eared owls sometimes gather in small groups, roosting together in dense hedge or conifer thicket. These communal roosts can contain a dozen or more birds sitting quietly in the same patch of trees, still and alert, close but not touching. There may be warmth in the proximity, there may be safety in numbers. The precise reason for the behavior is not entirely understood, but there is something appealing about the image of these solitary, night-bound creatures choosing in the coldest months to be near one another, sitting together in the branches, getting through the dark. The voice of an owl changes across its life. Young owlets begin with soft, piping calls, barely audible even when you are close to the nest. As they grow, the calls develop depth and character. A young tawny owl learning to hoot sounds slightly uncertain, the note a little unsteady as though it is testing the resonance of its own voice for the first time.
Adult males have voices that carry across fields and valleys, notes held long and steady and rich, like a singer who has learned to trust the power of what they are doing. The voice deepens with age. The calls become more confident. The owl learns over its first years of life how to sound exactly like an owl. The burrowing owl is the only owl that nests underground across most of its range. It lives on the open plains of the Americas, from the grasslands of Canada and the United States, all the way south through Mexico and Central America, and into the savannas of South America. It is a small owl, about the height of a large coffee mug, with long legs that give it an almost comical, stilt-walking appearance. When it moves across the ground, it stands at the entrance of its burrow and watches the wide world around it with extraordinary attentiveness.
When alarmed, it bobs up and down in a rapid, mechanical-looking movement that looks like a toy working through its spring. Inside the burrow, it lines the chamber with dry grasses and feathers and whatever soft material it can carry. It makes its home in the earth itself, burrowing down into the warm, quiet dark below the surface of the plains, protected from predators and weather alike. Interestingly, burrowing owls sometimes place pieces of animal dung around the entrance of their burrow. For a long time, scientists assumed this was simply incidental behavior. Then, careful observation revealed that the dung attracts dung beetles, which the owl then catches and eats. The owl is in effect baiting a trap, using material others would ignore as waste to create a reliable source of food. It is a small and elegant piece of problem solving. One of those things that makes you look at a small bird standing outside a hole in the ground and wonder just slightly who exactly is in charge of this encounter. Owls feature prominently in the night skies of the world's deserts. Many desert environments, which can feel almost lifeless during the scorching middle hours of the day, come alive after dark. Rodents emerge from their burrows. Insects fill the air. The temperature drops and the desert breathes. And the owls that have been sleeping through the heat open their eyes and begin to move. The western screech owl, the great horned owl, the elf owl, the ferruginous pygmy owl. In deserts across the Americas, the night air carries the various calls of multiple species, going about their business in the dark. The desert at night is not silent at all. It is busy with the quiet industry of creatures that have organized their entire lives around the cooler, darker hours. The owl among them, as always, the quietest and the most efficient. The lifespan of wild owls varies considerably by species. Small owls tend to live shorter lives. The elf owl may survive for several years in the wild. Larger species can live considerably longer. Great horned owls in the wild have been recorded living into their late teens. Barn owls, despite their widespread presence and adaptability, have surprisingly short average lifespans in the wild, often just 2 or 3 years. The challenges are many. Roads, power lines, rodenticides, the poisons used to kill rodents that accumulate in the bodies of the birds that eat them. A barn owl that survives its first winter and finds a good territory and a good mate has a reasonable chance of lasting longer. In captivity, where the dangers are removed, barn owls have been known to live for more than 20 years. The same bird that might barely see its 3rd birthday in the wild can, given protection and care, live long enough to see an entire generation of human children grow up. Owls raise their chicks in an unusual sequence.
Because owls begin incubating their eggs as soon as they are laid rather than waiting until the clutch is complete, the eggs hatch at different times. In a clutch of 5 eggs, the first chick might hatch 10 or more days before the last one. This means the nest contains chicks of very different sizes, and the oldest and largest chicks are fed first when food arrives. In years of plenty, all the chicks survive. In leaner years, only the older, stronger chicks make it. It is a system that ensures at least some offspring survive, even when conditions are difficult. Not all young owls have easy beginnings, but the ones that make it are already from their first moments the ones that were strong enough to be there. The great horned owl is sometimes called the tiger of the skies. It is one of the most powerful owls in the Americas. Its range extends from the boreal forests of northern Canada all the way to the southern tip of South America. It hunts skunks, rabbits, other birds of prey, and occasionally animals considerably larger than itself. It is the primary predator of the American crow in many areas. And crows, who are highly intelligent and have long memories, mob great horned owls whenever they encounter them during daylight hours, diving and calling and harassing the owl until it moves on. The owl sits through the mobbing with what appears to be complete equanimity, blinking slowly, turning its head slightly, waiting for the noise to pass. The crows are loud and numerous. The owl is patient. It always has been. One of the most remarkable things about great horned owls is that they begin nesting in the depths of winter. While most birds wait for spring, for warmth and longer days and the promise of easy food, great horned owls are already incubating eggs in January and February in the coldest parts of their range. Snow may be on the ground, temperatures may be far below freezing, and the female owl sits on her eggs in the open nest, feathers fluffed against the cold, unmoving and committed, keeping her future young alive with the warmth of her own body. By the time spring arrives and prey becomes more plentiful, the chicks are old enough to benefit from the increased food supply. The owl planned ahead in its own way, starting early so the hardest work would be done in time. Female owls are larger than males in almost all species. This pattern, called reverse sexual dimorphism, is common in birds of prey, but unusual in the broader animal kingdom, where males are typically the larger sex. Why it evolved this way in owls and raptors is still debated among biologists. Some suggest that smaller males are more agile hunters, able to catch smaller, faster prey that the larger female cannot. Others suggest that the larger female is better able to protect and incubate eggs in cold conditions. Still others suggest it reduces competition between mated pairs by giving them different hunting niches. Whatever the evolutionary reason, the effect is that the female owl is often noticeably larger and more imposing than her mate. She holds the nest. She incubates the eggs. She is the gravity around which the family organizes itself. Owls can find their way home across extraordinary distances. Studies of radio-tagged barn owls have shown that birds displaced from their home territories can navigate back to within a few miles of where they started from distances of many dozens of miles. The mechanisms by which they do this are not entirely understood. They may use landmarks. They may navigate by stars. They may use magnetic fields. They may use a combination of all of these. What is clear is that an owl knows where home is. It has an internal map of its territory and of the landscape surrounding it,
held somewhere in that calm, watching mind, precise enough to carry it back from far away through a dark and quiet night. The spectacled owl lives in the rainforests of Central and South America. It is named for the distinctive white rings around its eyes that give it the appearance of wearing large, round glasses. It is a striking bird, dark brown above and warm buff below, with those pale spectacle rings making its face look both serious and faintly surprised. It roosts deep in the rainforest canopy by day and hunts at night in the layered, complex darkness of the forest understory. Spectacled owls are found in old-growth forest almost exclusively, another member of the long list of owl species that depend on ancient trees and the slow accumulated architecture of undisturbed forests. The rainforest at night is alive in a way that the rainforest by day is not. A different layer of life stirs when the light goes, and the spectacled owl moves through that layer with the confident ease of something born to the dark. The Verreaux's eagle owl, also called the giant eagle owl or milky eagle owl, is one of the largest owls in Africa. It has distinctive pink eyelids that give it an unexpectedly delicate, almost gentle appearance. It roosts in riverine trees along the watercourses of sub-Saharan Africa, hunting at night for a remarkable variety of prey, from hedgehogs and hares to monitor lizards and smaller birds of prey. Its call is a deep, resonant, booming sound that carries across the African night like a slow drumbeat. To hear it in the dark, far from any town, with the river nearby and the stars bright overhead, is one of those experiences that settles into the memory and stays there for a long time. Owls are extraordinarily diverse in what they eat. We tend to think of owls as mouse hunters, and many of them are. But the range of prey taken by owls as a family is genuinely remarkable. Insects, earthworms, frogs, fish, scorpions, snakes, bats, other owls, ducks, rabbits, young foxes, and cats. The great horned owl will eat almost anything it can subdue, which is quite a wide range of things. The tiny elf owl eats almost nothing but insects and the occasional scorpion. In between those extremes, the 250-odd species of owl have found ways to feed themselves on whatever the particular corner of the world they inhabit has to offer. They are not inflexible. They are not locked into a single food source. They are readers of their own landscape, finding in each place what that place makes available. The silence around an owl's roost is often remarkable. In areas where owls regularly roost, the small birds of the neighborhood usually learn very quickly where the owl is. They check. They send out sentinels. They organize themselves with a quiet vigilance that keeps them safe through the long daylight hours while the owl sleeps. And so, in a strange way, the owl's roosting spot becomes a center of attention, a place around which the rest of the forest or garden organizes itself. Birds know where it is. Squirrels know where it is. The small mammals of the undergrowth know where it is. The owl sits in all that careful awareness and sleeps. The deep and untroubled sleep of something that has no predators it needs to fear. Owls have featured in scientific research that has changed our understanding of hearing. The work done on barn owl hearing, beginning in the 1970s and 80s, fundamentally altered neuroscience's understanding of how brains create spatial maps of sound. Masakazu Konishi, a scientist at Caltech,
spent decades studying exactly how the barn owl's brain processes the tiny timing differences between sound arriving at one ear and sound arriving at the other. He discovered that the barn owl has a specialized neural circuit that works like a delay line coincidence detector, comparing the timing of signals from each ear with extraordinary precision, and using that comparison to calculate the location of a sound source in three-dimensional space. This mechanism has inspired engineers designing hearing aids, sound localization systems, and acoustic sensing technology. A barn owl perched in a dark barn in the English countryside, waiting for a mouse to move, is also, without knowing it, operating one of the most elegant signal processing systems ever studied by science. Owls inspire a specific kind of quiet wonder in the people who spend time with them. Wildlife rehabilitators who work with injured owls often report that the experience of handling a live owl, even a small one, is unlike handling any other bird. There is a quality to the owl's gaze that feels slightly uncomfortably like being truly seen. The large eyes, the forward-facing orientation, the stillness, the sense that the owl is processing you with the same focused attention that it would give to anything it was evaluating in the dark. Most birds look away from you, skittery and evasive. An owl looks at you and does not look away. It seems in that moment to embody exactly the quality that centuries of human symbolism have assigned to it: deep attention, patient seeing, the calm certainty of something that is not afraid of what it knows. Owls have a unique relationship with the moon. They are not creatures of the moon in the way that folklore sometimes suggests, but moonlight is genuinely useful to them. On a bright, full moon night, the landscape below a hunting owl is softly illuminated. The field is pale silver, the hedge casts a gentle shadow. The mouse, moving along its run through the grass, is briefly visible. Many owls hunt more actively on moonlit nights, particularly in open country, where the light reaches the ground easily. The barn owl, in particular, seems to prefer hunting on clear, bright nights, when its extraordinary eyesight can work in combination with its hearing, giving it a more complete picture of the world below. Moonlight and owls, two things so long associated with one another that the association has become its own kind of truth. There is something about the moon rising over a field and the pale shape of an owl lifting off into it that feels ancient and right, like something that was always going to be exactly that way. Owls communicate with their bodies as much as with their voices.
When two owls of the same species encounter each other, especially at a contested territorial boundary, they engage in a remarkable series of postural exchanges. The feathers may be sleeked tight to the body, making the bird look lean and pointed and formidable. Or they may be puffed out enormously, doubling the owl's apparent size, making it look large and solid and unyielding. The wings may be spread and lowered, the ear tufts raised, the eyes opened wide or narrowed to slits. The body rocked from side to side in what owl researchers call a rocking thread display. All of this communication happens in near silence. Two owls standing on branches facing each other, conducting their negotiation in the language of feather and posture, while the night flows quietly around them. Most of the time, the negotiation ends without contact. One owl is convinced that the other means what it says. It turns. It slips off its branch. It vanishes into the dark. And the remaining owl settles its feathers back into place, smooths itself back to ordinary size, and returns to the business of the night. The connection between owls and trees runs far deeper than simply nesting. Owls depend on trees in almost every aspect of their lives. They roost in trees. They hunt from trees. They watch the world from trees. They call from trees. They raise their young in the hollows of trees. The oldest, most gnarled, most cavity-filled trees are the most valuable to them. A tree with a split trunk that has been slowly hollowing for decades is more precious to a tawny owl than a dozen young, smooth, perfectly formed ones. The imperfection of old age is exactly what makes the old tree useful. Every wound the tree survived, every storm that broke a branch and left a hollow, every slow decade of decay that opened a space inside the trunk created something that the owl could use. There is a lesson in that, if you want one. The old and scarred and slightly broken thing is often the one that provides the most. But you do not have to take a lesson from it. You can just let the image rest in your mind. An old tree, a hollow inside it, a sleeping owl, the night going quietly on. Blakiston's fish owl is the largest owl in the world. It lives in the river valleys of northeastern Asia in Russia, China, and Japan, in regions where the winters are extraordinarily cold and the rivers run clear and cold and full of fish. Blakiston's fish owl stands over 2 feet tall. Its wingspan approaches 6 feet. It is massive in the way that things which live in severe environments often are, built for endurance and persistence in a landscape that asks much of everything that lives in it. It hunts fish and frogs through the winter, standing in the shallows of partly frozen rivers and plunging its talons into the moving water. It calls at night with a deep, booming duet that the mated pair performs together, the two birds calling in synchrony in one of the more unusual owl behaviors known to science. In the snowy forests of the Russian Far East, Blakiston's fish owl is an almost legendary creature. Rarely seen, but unmistakable to those who have encountered it. Vast and patient in the frozen dark, the largest of all its kind. Owls go through a baby stage that is genuinely endearing. Owlets hatch covered in soft white down. Their eyes are closed. They are entirely helpless. They make small, soft sounds and press together for warmth in the dark of the nest. Over the following weeks, the down gives way to a second layer of fluffier gray or brown down, and then, gradually, to the first real feathers. During this intermediate stage, young owls have a distinctive look, part fluffy cloud, part half-formed bird, their face discs developing but not yet complete, their flight feathers coming in as stiff spines, their eyes enormous in their small round faces. They look, quite frankly, like something that has not yet decided what it is going to be. But they are entirely owls, watching the world from the edge of the nest with a concentrated attention that is already unmistakably their own. Before they can fly, young owls often climb out of the nest and spend time on nearby branches, exercising their wings and learning to navigate the tree on foot. Wildlife rehabilitators call this the branching stage. Young barn owls in barns will clamber around on the beams and rafters, sometimes for days, building the strength and coordination they need before their first flight. The parents continue to bring food during this period, arriving silently in the dark, delivering prey to wherever the youngster happens to be perched, finding it again and again by the soft sounds it makes in the dark. Owls regulate their body temperature in interesting ways. Like all birds, owls are warm-blooded, maintaining a constant internal temperature regardless of the conditions around them. But managing heat in extreme environments requires adaptations. In cold conditions, owls fluff their feathers to trap warm air close to the body, creating an insulating layer that can be surprisingly effective. A snowy owl sitting in a blizzard, feathers raised and round, has an internal temperature decades of degrees warmer than the air around it. In hot conditions, owls do something called gular fluttering. They open their beaks slightly and vibrate the thin skin of the throat rapidly, increasing evaporative cooling without the energy cost of panting. It looks like the owl is silently talking to itself, moving its throat in a small, rapid shimmer. The desert owls that must deal with daytime temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit use this technique and seek the deepest shade and the coolest recesses they can find to wait out the heat. The sounds that owls make in their first weeks of life include some of the softest, most vulnerable sounding calls in the bird world. Tiny owlets produce a sound called food begging calls, a persistent hissing or chirping sound that they make when hungry, which is most of the time. The parent returning to the nest follows this sound like a beacon, navigating through the dark to the exact spot where the young are waiting. These calls continue as the youngsters grow, becoming louder and more insistent until the juveniles finally leave the natal area and establish their own lives. For several weeks after leaving the parents' territory, juvenile owls sometimes produce contact calls, soft calls in the dark that seem to be reaching back toward something, toward the familiar, toward home, before they find their own. Every owl that hunts tonight was a helpless, tiny, down-covered creature not so long ago, pressed against its siblings in the dark of a nest, waiting for the sound of wings returning, waiting for the warmth of the parent settling back down. It has come a very long way since then. Through cold nights and lean seasons and the long process of learning how to live in the dark. And now it moves through that dark with perfect ease. The distribution of owls tells us a great deal about the health of ecosystems. Because owls sit near the top of local food chains, their presence and abundance reflects the health of the prey populations below them, which in turn reflects the health of the vegetation, the soil, the water, the whole interlocking system of life. A landscape with healthy owl populations is generally a landscape where many other things are healthy too. When owl numbers decline in an area, it is often one of the first signs that something in that landscape has changed in a way that matters. Scientists use owl populations as a monitoring tool, tracking the health of forest ecosystems, grassland health, the impacts of farming practices on small mammal populations. The owl does not know it is being monitored. It simply lives or fails to live, and in doing so, tells us something true about the world it inhabits. The African Scops owl is one of the smallest owls on the continent. It is a small, gray-brown bird with ear tufts that sits pressed against a tree trunk and disappears into it with remarkable completeness. Its cryptic plumage mimics tree bark so closely that you can stand 2 feet from one and not see it at all. It calls at night with a single, monotonous note, repeated every few seconds with extraordinary regularity. One call, pause.
One call, pause. Like a slow, gentle heartbeat in the dark. Travelers in Africa who camp in the bush often fall asleep to this sound. The scops owl calling steadily through the warm African night, its single note measuring out the hours of darkness in its own unhurried way. There is something meditative about that sound, heard under a sky thick with stars and the rustling of the bush around you. A single note, a pause, a single note.
The owl finding the rhythm of the night and keeping it faithfully all the way to morning. Some owls perform elaborate courtship displays. The great gray owl male, when trying to attract a mate or reinforce a bond, brings prey to the female repeatedly and presents it with a formal, deliberate head bow. The female accepts or declines, and the exchange is repeated many times over several nights. This food offering behavior is common in owls and raptors. It demonstrates the male's ability to provide. It builds trust. It creates a history between the two birds before the commitment of nesting begins. The long-eared owl male performs flight displays over his territory during early spring, flying in wide circles, calling repeatedly, clapping his wings together beneath his body in a startling loud crack that carries across the dark field. It is one of the more surprising sounds in British wildlife, heard on still March nights from fields where you would not expect to hear anything so emphatic. The owl making itself known, saying, "I am here, I am strong, I am ready." Barn owls can have a wingspan of nearly 3 feet. That is a wide and beautiful spread of wing for a bird that weighs less than a pound. The ratio of wing area to body weight is what gives the barn owl its characteristic, slow, buoyant, almost floating quality of flight. It does not need to work hard to stay airborne. The wings are large enough to hold the bird up on the lightest of updrafts, and the body is light enough to be carried by wind and warm air with very little effort. Watching a barn owl hunt is one of the most purely beautiful things that the natural world around us regularly offers. The slowness, the near silence, the pale shape moving against the darkening sky, the way it tips its head earthward and listens as it flies, the way it drops suddenly and precisely from flight to the ground and back up again in a single, unbroken movement. Every flight, a small, quiet miracle of physics and feather, and 60 million years of refinement. Owls have been found at extraordinary altitudes during migration. Some owl species migrate, making seasonal movements between breeding grounds and wintering grounds. The short-eared owl migrates across significant distances in both Europe and North America. The northern hawk owl and several other boreal species move southward in eruption years. During these movements, owls have been detected by radar, crossing open water, moving over mountain ranges, navigating in the dark at significant altitude. They travel alone. They travel at night. They follow routes and cues that are not yet completely understood. An owl leaving its northern breeding ground in autumn and arriving at its southern wintering ground weeks later has crossed landscapes and weather systems and darkness, guided by something internal and precise that we are still working to fully understand. The night sky through which the migrating owl moves is the same sky that ancient sailors navigated by. The same sky, full of stars and star patterns, that has guided movement across the world for as long as there has been anything on Earth to move. The owl reads it differently than we do, but it reads it, and it finds its way. Owls have been the subject of scientific study for over 2 centuries of organized ornithology. From the first careful natural history observations of Gilbert White in 18th century England,
who described the tawny owl and barn owl with characteristic gentleness and precision, to the sophisticated radiotelemetry and genomic studies of today, the owl has been a constant presence in the scientific record. Every generation of naturalists seems to find in owls something worth studying more carefully, something that does not quite yield all its secrets, even under the most rigorous examination. There are still questions about owl hearing that are not fully resolved. There are still aspects of their navigation that are not understood. There are still behaviors that have been observed but not yet explained to anyone's full satisfaction. The owl keeps its mysteries, even in an age of science, with the calm certainty of a creature that has never felt the need to explain itself. The tawny owl's territory is among the most consistent things in British nature. A pair of tawny owls will hold the same territory, call from the same trees, nest in the same hollow for decades. Individual tawny owls have been recorded on the same territory for 15 years or more. The garden that has a tawny owl hooting in it tonight may have had a tawny owl hooting in it before any of the current residents of the surrounding houses were born. The same owl, or the succession of owls that have held that space, calling through the same autumn nights, hunting through the same winter fields, raising young in the same tree. The world around the territory changes. Houses go up, gardens change, people come and go, and the tawny owl continues its call through each successive autumn, anchoring the night to something old and steady and entirely its own. Owl feathers have been used by humans since the earliest times. In many traditions, owl feathers carried spiritual significance, used in ceremony, in healing, in protective objects. The soft, silent quality of an owl feather, its almost impossibly fine texture when held in the hand, gave it a quality unlike the feathers of other birds. If you have ever held an owl feather, you will know what this means. The leading edge is comb-like, soft and complex. The vein of the feather is loose and plush, not tightly zipped together like a duck feather or a hawk feather. It has weight without stiffness, substance without hardness. It feels improbably like the idea of silence made into a physical thing. The world's owls collectively control billions of small animals each night. Not as a coordinated effort, of course. They are not organizing. They are simply each hunting their own territory, catching what they find, living their quiet lives. But the cumulative effect of 250 species spread across every continent, every habitat, hunting every night, is an almost incalculable regulation of small animal populations. Without owls and the other birds of prey and predators that share their role, rodent populations would fluctuate far more wildly. The harvests of farmers would be more severely hit. The balance of ecosystems would shift. The owl is not just beautiful and mysterious and symbolically resonant. It is ecologically essential, a working part of the machinery of life, doing its work quietly every night, without recognition or reward, simply because that is what it is built to do. Owls have complex social hierarchies that are only beginning to be understood. We tend to think of owls as solitary, and most of them are, at least during the breeding season. But their relationships with neighboring owls are nuanced and ongoing. Neighboring tawny owl pairs know each other's calls as individuals. They respond differently to a call from a known neighbor than to a call from an unknown intruder. Known neighbors are tolerated within established boundaries. Unknown voices are investigated more urgently. This suggests a social awareness, a mental map of who lives where, a memory of specific individuals and their territories that extends across years. The owl is not just aware of its own territory, it is aware of its neighborhood, and it knows the residents by the sound of their voices in the dark. There is something quietly remarkable about that. The network of owls in a valley or a forest, each calling from its own hollow tree, each knowing the others by voice, each holding its own piece of the dark, forms a kind of invisible community that spans the whole landscape. A community of listeners, a community of patience, a community of the night. The Eurasian eagle owl is one of the most impressive birds in the world. It is found across a vast range from the British Isles across Europe and through Russia into China and Korea. It hunts from rocky cracks and forest edges, taking prey from hares and rabbits down to other birds of prey. Its call, a deep, sonorous two-note hoot, carries extraordinary distances through the mountains and forests of its range. In parts of Europe, where it was once extinct due to persecution and is now returning through protection and natural recolonization, the return of the eagle owl's call to a valley is reported by local people as something approaching an event, something heard at night and recognized as different, as larger, as carrying more weight in the air. The return of something that had been missing. A voice that belongs to the landscape, coming back to where it belongs. Owls produce different calls for different purposes. The hoot that we think of as the archetypal owl sound is primarily a territorial advertisement, a statement of presence and ownership directed at other owls of the same species. But owls also produce contact calls, softer notes exchanged between mated partners. They produce alarm calls, a rapid barking or chattering sound directed at perceived threats. They produce food begging calls. They produce duet calls used in pair bonding. And some species produce sounds for which the function is still being debated. The repertoire of a single owl species, when mapped carefully by researchers with recording equipment, turns out to be considerably more complex and varied than the casual listener would guess. The owl has more to say than it appears, or perhaps more accurately, it has exactly as much to say as it needs to, and no more. Owls have inspired painters and photographers for as long as those arts have existed. John James Audubon, whose vast project of painting every bird species in North America remains one of the greatest works of natural history ever produced, painted owls with particular care. His great horned owl, his barred owl, his barn owl studies all show the same quality, a careful attention to the stillness of the bird, to the way the feathers lie, to the quality of the gaze. The owl sits for a portrait differently than other birds. It does not fidget, it does not look away. It looks back at you with that characteristic forward-facing steadiness, and it holds the look. Photographers who work with owls speak about this quality. The owl is always present in its image in a way other birds often are not. Even in a photograph of a barn owl in flight, even when the bird is moving and the shutter is catching it mid-beat, there is a quality of completeness to the image. The owl is always fully the owl, always entirely itself, caught in time, but not diminished by it. The silence before an owl strikes is absolute. A barn owl hunting at night over a meadow does not make a sound that the meadow can hear. The feathers are moving, the wings are working. Air is flowing past the body at considerable speed, and yet the meadow hears nothing. The mouse moving through the grass at the edge of the drainage ditch has no warning. The owl, 30 feet above, has already triangulated the sound of its movement, has already tilted into the approach angle, has already begun the long, silent, descending glide. And the first the mouse knows of it is the last thing it knows. It is over instantly and without cruelty. The owl does not prolong, it does not display, it simply does what it needs to do with the minimum of effort and the maximum of precision. And then it is aloft again with the small, warm weight in its talons, crossing the field in the same great, slow arcs. Back toward the perch, back toward the waiting young, back toward the familiar tree at the edge of the familiar barn, where the night will continue until the sky in the east begins its imperceptible lightening. Owls know the moment before dawn. They feel it before we would notice it. Some shift in the air, some change in the quality of the dark, some signal that the night's work is drawing toward its close. The calls become less frequent, the hunting trips shorten. The owl finds its roost and settles in. The feathers fluff up around it, the head tucks down slightly. The eyes, so wide and bright and watchful through the dark hours, begin to close. The owl sleeps into the morning, into the light that it does not need and does not seek, into the warm, still hours of the day that belong to other creatures, while the night, which belongs to the owl, is gathered back into the turning of the world and stored again for later. The world is vast and full of creatures going about their lives in ways we rarely witness. The ant carrying its burden through the leaf litter, the earthworm moving through the dark soil, the bat navigating by sound through the orchard, the fox stepping quietly across the sleeping garden,
And above all of it, in the dark sky, moving on wings that make no sound, the owl looking down at everything, seeing what we cannot see, hearing what we cannot hear, living in a world that runs parallel to ours and intersects with it just enough that sometimes on a quiet night, a dark shape passes overhead, and for a moment we are reminded that the world is bigger than we usually remember. That is a good thing to be reminded of, especially at night. Especially now when the day with all its demands is behind you, and the night is around you, and there is nothing left to do but let your body grow heavy and your thoughts grow quiet, and the dark becomes something comfortable and familiar and safe. You are like the owl now, still in the dark, resting between one thing and the next, not needing to know what the next thing will be, just here, just breathing, just being. The moor at night has a quality that daytime visitors never experience. When the last light fades from the western sky and the curlews have gone quiet and the wind drops to almost nothing, the moor becomes a place of extraordinary stillness. The heather holds the dark like a dark sea. The distant hills are soft shapes against the sky. Stars appear, and then more stars, and then more still, until the sky is crowded with them. And then, if you are patient and quiet, you might hear it. The short-eared owl somewhere out over the heather making a soft barking call. Not close, perhaps a quarter-mile away, perhaps more. And then the sound of its wings, or rather the absence of sound, as it passes overhead low enough to see against the backdrop of all those stars. A dark shape, silent, moving purposefully across the night moor. Still still in the heather and watch those moments. The moments of unexpected, unplanned contact with a wild creature going about its real life stay with people. They are stored differently from ordinary memories. They have a quality of gift about them, something given that was not asked for, something true and unrepeatable that happened and then was over and left something behind in the person who witnessed it. A barn owl drifting past a car window on a country road at dusk. A tawny owl calling from the oak tree at the end of the garden. A snowy owl, impossibly white, sitting on a fence post at the edge of a winter field. These moments have been reported to naturalists and wildlife organizations by people who sometimes become quite emotional in the telling, because there is something about the encounter with an owl that reaches past the ordinary day and touches something older and less easily named. The spotted wood owl of Southeast Asia is one of the most beautifully marked owls in the world. Its plumage is a complex pattern of brown and white covered in fine barring and spotting that gives it a richly textured appearance, like an intricate piece of woven cloth. It lives in lowland forests and forest edges across the Malay Peninsula and into Indonesia. It calls at night with a rhythmic two-note hoot that has a slightly questioning quality, as though it is asking something of the dark forest around it. The tropical forests at night are among the loudest environments on Earth. Insects, frogs, nightjars, and many other creatures fill the air with sound. The spotted wood owl's call moves through all of that, steady and clear and unhurried, holding its own note in the great, complex choir of the tropical night. Owls are proof that specialization and diversity are not opposites. Every owl species is highly specialized for its particular way of life, and yet the family as a whole is extraordinarily diverse in habitat, in diet, in behavior, in appearance. The specialization happened in 250 different directions at once, each species finding its own precise niche within the broader space that owls occupy in the world's ecosystems.
The lesson, if there is one, is that being fully and completely one thing does not limit you to one place. It simply means that wherever you go, you are exactly what you need to be there. The barn owl in the English countryside. The elf owl in the Sonoran desert. Blakiston's fish owl by the Siberian River. The snowy owl on the Arctic plain. Each one completely itself. Each one exactly at home. Owls perceive the world through senses we can only approximate in imagination. To experience even a few minutes of what an owl experiences on a dark night hunting, the three-dimensional sound map, the sensitivity to ultraviolet trails below, the ability to sense the faintest vibration in the air, would be to inhabit a world vastly richer in information than the one we normally move through. We navigate mostly by daylight and language. The owl navigates by darkness and sensation. We see the surface of things. The owl hears through them. Between our perception of the world and the owl's perception of the world, there is an enormous distance. Even when we are standing in the same field, under the same sky, that distance is humbling in the best way. It is a reminder that the world does not depend on our ability to perceive it, that it is fuller and stranger and more intricate than any single set of senses can take in. The owl knows things about the night that we will never know. And somewhere out there in the dark, it is using those things to live its precise and beautiful life. The world is full of quiet miracles that happen without an audience. The barn owl catching a mouse in total darkness. The great gray owl diving through snow.
the snowy owl sitting on the tundra, warming her eggs through a blizzard. Her whole body a small and steady source of heat in the white and howling world. These things happen whether or not anyone is there to see them. They have been happening for tens of millions of years, long before there was anyone to notice, long before there was anyone to be moved by them, and they will continue into the long future. Whatever shape that future takes, the owls will be there, moving through the dark, listening, finding what they need, being completely and perfectly what they are. That constancy is a comfort. To know that the night is inhabited by patient, extraordinary creatures that have been doing what they do since long before our species arrived, and will likely continue long after whatever comes next. The owl does not need our help to be magnificent. It does not need our attention to be valid. It exists in its own right, for its own purposes, with its own ancient and complete understanding of the world it lives in. We are fortunate occasionally to glimpse it, to hear its call in the dark, to see its shape against the moon, to be reminded just for a moment that the night has its own full and living world in it, and that we are, in the most literal sense, sharing the planet with something remarkable. As the night deepens and the owls of the world go about their ancient work, there is a kind of order in knowing they are out there, in the old barns and the hollow trees, and the cactus forests and the snow-covered boreal, in the river valleys of Africa and the rainforest canopies of South America, in the gardens of England and the steppes of Central Asia, in the rice fields of Southeast Asia, in the open plains of the American Midwest. Somewhere, right now, a barn owl is lifting off a fence post and drifting across a moonlit field. Somewhere, a great grey owl is tilting its huge disk of a face toward a sound beneath the snow. Somewhere, a small elf owl is tucked inside a cactus, eyes open just slightly, listening to the desert night. Somewhere, two tawny owls are calling back and forth through a dark wood, their voices threading through the trees, finding each other. The night is very large, and the owls are in all of it. Owls can live in cities. This might seem surprising for creatures so associated with wild places and ancient forests, but several owl species have adapted remarkably well to urban environments. Tawny owls nest in city parks and large gardens in European cities. Great horned owls have raised chicks on rooftops in American cities. Barn owls use old churches and clock towers in towns across the world. The burrowing owl has established populations in suburban areas in Florida and California, nesting in vacant lots and road margins and the edges of golf courses. Screech owls in North America have adapted easily to suburban neighborhoods, nesting in tree cavities and nest boxes in backyards, hunting the insects and small rodents that human-created environments reliably produce. The city at night is not wilderness, but for a creature of darkness and silence, it has its own kinds of opportunity. The owl finds the quiet patches within the noise. It finds the dark corridors between the lighted places. It finds always a way to be what it is in whatever world it finds itself in. The sound of an owl calling in an otherwise silent night has a particular quality that is difficult to describe. It is both near and far. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. It does not disturb the silence so much as deepen it, making the quiet around it feel more present, more real. People who hear an owl call for the first time often stop whatever they are doing. They go still. They listen without quite deciding to. They have entered the owl's time, that slow and quiet and ancient time that runs beneath the faster surface of our days. You are in that time now. If you are still listening, the time of the owl. Slow, dark, quiet, full of small sounds and patient watches and the great wheeling dark overhead. Let yourself settle into it. There is nothing that needs doing now, nowhere that needs visiting, nothing that needs solving, just the dark and the quiet and the owls moving through it. Owls have a third eyelid that protects them during fierce moments and keeps them clear-eyed for the night ahead. It is in its way a kind of built-in renewal. Each blink a small reset, each moment of stillness a restoration. The owl does not spend its resting hours worrying about what the night will bring. It simply rests completely. And then, when the time comes, it opens its eyes and is ready. You can do that too. Rest completely. Let the worry about what comes next wait until morning. It will be there then, if it still matters. Most things matter less in the morning light than they did in the dark. Owls are proof that the night is not empty. The darkness that falls every evening is not an absence. It is a fullness, a different world that opens up when the world of daylight closes down. The owls know this. They have always known it. For 60 million years, they have been moving through the dark hours, finding what they need, giving life to the quiet night, carrying their ancient knowledge of shadow and sound and stillness through every corner of this planet. They are the keepers of the night world, the patient watchers, the quiet wings, the eyes that see when ours cannot. And they are right now out there in the dark beyond your window, doing exactly what they have always done. Watching, listening, waiting, belonging completely to the night. As you let your breathing slow and let the weight of your body settle more deeply into where you are resting, imagine one of them. Picture a barn owl, white and silent, flying low across a moonlit field. Its wings barely moving, each stroke slow and deep and utterly quiet. The field beneath it is silver and still. The grass barely stirs. The only sound is the faintest breath of wind. The owl moves across the field like a thought crossing a quiet mind, unhurried, perfectly at home, going nowhere in particular and everywhere it needs to be.
Let that image sit with you for a moment. The owl drifting, the field below silver and still, the night vast and patient and full of quiet. You have nothing to do now but rest. The owl is watching. The night is full, and you are safe in the quiet and the dark. So, dear listener, we have spent a long and gentle time together in the company of owls. We have followed them through frozen boreal forests and across moonlit fields. We have sat with them on their roosting branches and listened to them call across the dark. We've learned how they see, how they hear, how they fly, how they raise their young, how they find their way home across the dark world. We have visited their ancient place in the human imagination, in the myths and stories and symbols that people have made around them. For as long as people and owls have shared the night,
The owl reminds us that the dark is not something to be afraid of. It is something to be present in, to be still in, to listen carefully in. The owl lives its whole extraordinary life in the hours between last light and first light. And in those hours, it finds everything it needs. It asks nothing of the day. It takes nothing from the light. It belongs entirely to the quiet, to the slow turning of the dark, to the time when the world finally stops rushing and simply is. You are in that time now, right now, in the quiet hours, in the soft and unhurried dark, breathing slowly, letting the day go, letting the thoughts drift past like the faintest breath of wind across a moonlit field. Somewhere out there, an owl is perched on a branch and listening to the same silence you are in, the same quiet, the same dark, and it is entirely at peace. So can you be. If sleep has not quite arrived yet, let it come in its own time. Like the owl, you do not need to chase it. You only need to be still and let it find you. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the warmth around you.
Let each breath be a little slower than the last. Let the dark be soft. Let the quiet be enough. The owls are in the night. The night is everywhere. And sleep is coming quietly on silent wings toward you. Good night.